Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to this fourth edition of From Enemies and Strangers to Friends, Overcoming Cultural Divides and Differences. For those of you who have been following along in the last 4 months, you know that we have taken a look at how sports, music, even our pets can provide a common ground for us to be able to talk to each other, even if we have various kinds of social and political differences. Today, we're looking at something that has been of long interest to me, and that's business. Not only because I'm a business ethics professor, but because for the last 20 years of my career, I focused on the idea of business and peace, as has our speaker today, Per Saxegaard. Per Saxegaard is a great and dear friend. We have worked together on many occasions over the years. And one of the things that I really like in talking to Per and with Per is he's a real businessman. He's not an academic. He's not an ethics professor, but he has one of the strongest views of business ethics of any business person that I've ever heard. And he specifically ties that to peace. And if you're going to be talking about overcoming cultural divides and differences, you're in the discussion of what is creating peace and putting cultural divides and differences together. Per is an investment banker. He's also an active business person and investor, and the founding partner of Norden Realkapital Group in Oslo, Norway. I came to know him because he's the founder and executive chairman of the Business for Peace Foundation in Oslo. And as you are going to hear, he has developed or coined a term called businessworthy that I think is a really powerful tool for us to be thinking about how business can successfully operate and to provide meaning in our work. And in doing so, I think that we will find an ability to overcome some of those cultural divides and differences that the world is seeing these days. So with that, welcome, Per. I'm glad to have you. We've had so many conversations, but I think it's the first time we've actually recorded them. So
Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you so much for having me.
Sure.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Sure, thank you. So let's start off with the first question, a real basic one. What led you to focus on business and peace in the first place and the formation of the Business for Peace Foundation?
That's really a long journey of various kind of experiences and reflections. Basically coming out of a traditional financial-oriented business view towards the concept that you mentioned that we have developed, which is called being businessworthy, which really gives some insights to, I think, both on a personal individual level, how do you get a good life and be happy if you like, and on the business level, how do you make smart strategy and smart development of your business, and at the same time in a way that makes business force for good. So these three levels simultaneously gave me over time an understanding that not all financial return or profit, if you like, are created equal. So it's a big difference there. And when I started out, took my MBAs in the mid '80s, making money was a key focus. I even organized in the sort of group I was heading up a seminar by the quite strong title, How to Become Rich. And I can tell you, the room was so packed with people. and I think it was a symbol of the timing. It was about to earn as much money as quickly as possible. And that followed me for a number of years and ventured me into finance and investment banking, as you mentioned. And I did make a lot of money, but I also came to experience the tunnel vision of being that focused, which I think led to eventually my divorce, which broke down my marriage and some personal reflections coming out of that. And it struck me that the relationship between making money and be happy or have well-being is not a curve that goes like this. It's a curve like goes like this. So, and it's reflecting on this and looking into the matter. It seems that on a quite modest level of money, the marginal utility of making another dollar is not growing that much. And if you come far along the curve, it might even go down, and you get the tunnel vision problem. So in a way, making money is not that good a deal alone. And further reflection on this, I found that there's another curve that goes in the opposite direction, up, up, always up. And that's not making money, but that's making a difference to other people. So that's sort of being driving with a higher purpose, if you like. And the idea of being business worthy is to get those two curves to go together. So you can have a higher purpose, make a difference, and still make money. So it's that was sort of some of the insights, because reflecting on it, purpose is really what nourishes meaning. And we all, everybody would like to feel that what we do is meaningful. Who would like to work with something which is not meaningful? So I came to the conclusion that money can motivate, but no amount can really inspire. Inspiration comes from inside. And to be inspired, you need a bigger idea, a bigger ideal. You need to be part of something which is bigger than yourself, bigger than your product, if you like. So that's where purpose comes in. And I think on the personal level, this has very much to do with what should be really the identity of being in business. Should it only be about making money? I mean, as a professor, you have a calling for learning other people and educating other people. As a doctor, you have a calling. Even as a priest, you have a calling, obviously. But as a business person, just making money doesn't really sound to me on a personal level to be enough. And so, thinking on this from a purely business point of view, I think this resonates quite well, because most of us find purpose in work outside work, whether that's in your church or in other aspects. But if we could put it into work, it can be a tremendous motivator, because we all have more energy if we feel that what we are part of is bigger than ourselves, and we are sort of getting meaning in what we do. So this obviously have relevance to leadership and to the culture that a business have. And I think that culture is probably the one competitive differentiator that over time really makes sense, because technology can be copied overnight and can last only so much, but it's only human beings that create value. It's only human being that can solve problems. So the culture you have and the meaning you have by going to work, I think is underestimated in that context. Now then comes technology, which I have worked a lot on, and the accelerating speed of change and transformation that technology leads to, getting us more and more interconnected, more and more interdependent, across borders, across societies. And it really tells us that business cannot live in a vacuum outside what's happening. It has to be in it. We now see that technology also led us to huge levels of polarizing situations that you see a lot in the US, but also other places in the world, which really underlines even more that the traditional narrow-minded view of financial value creation might not be that relevant in the future. So I think this necessitates a broader view of in business thinking. You need to take account of your ecosystem, your stakeholder, i.e. your society around. And I think we'll see gradually that societal challenges are the same as business challenges. There is no trade-off between social progress and profitability. it's in fact the very opposite. It's by solving them, you have the cradle of innovation, because over time, to create value, you must solve problems. If you don't solve a problem, you're basically stealing. And you must solve it in such an effective way that you get competitive advantage of it. So I think the key is that the relevance on a business level is both on a leadership and culture, but also on a strategic level. It's not just what you do, but also how you do it. And I think the key element is that business needs to be optimized for more than financial returns. We need to merge profit to a higher purpose. I think what we've seen since we started talking a number of years ago, Tim, that a number of sophisticated businesses increasingly are coming around to this view, increasingly. So I think the recognition of the synergies and interdependence between business success and societal success is becoming more and more evident. And on this societal level, a higher purpose in business really means a societal or social purpose, if you like. So in the Business Foundation's vision, we think business should be here for society. And if business is here for society, it must be to improve society, basically. And by solving problems that merge the societal level with the business level, you do that. You help improving society by finding new solutions to old problems or solutions to new problems, but faster, better, stronger, whatever, in a way that has not been done before. So there's always been a slogan in business to have as an ambition to be the best in the world. I think what's happening now is emerging this to become also the best for the world. And that purpose that is in that is an extremely strong motivator for organizations, I think. So if improving society means solving problems and creating value, it focuses on what is really value creation. And I think coming from a financial point of view, we have mixed this a little bit up, because we've said that value creation is the same as financial value extraction, which is quite different. Mm-hmm. Value creation must be much bigger than what you extract to your shareholders. Otherwise, you don't create value. I think this nuance is quite important, because when an investment decision is taken, a lot of things happen. It's not limited to what you get as a financial return. There's a lot of other implications when a decision is taken. And the consciousness of that, whether that is positive or negative externalities or whatever, what it is, need to be part of the equation, need to be part of the mindset you have, the reflections you do. And that's not just to avoid the downside, but it's really to reap the upside. So that's why I think this broader thinking of value creation links this together, and this higher purpose, if you like, on a personal level, on a business level, and on a societal level. So we need to mobilize business for this kind of mindset, and seeing that business worthy is represent that kind of mindset, that kind of ideal in business, if you like. And in that context, hopefully, business can be a force for good and contribute to building peace.
Very good. That was great. Great. So let me go to the next question. I know that one of the things that your foundation does is that it holds an annual event, and at that event, you give out what's called the Oslo Award, which recognizes honorees of business people who have done something to exemplify those values that you just articulated. I was wondering, just to take your concepts and to put them into a concrete framework or example of businesses who have done this. If you might be able to describe, 2 or 3 of the honorees and what they do, and so we get a real sense of how those businesses implement these ideas.
Yeah, um, this is really an incentive to this idea to accelerate this business-worthy thinking globally. And usually business leaders don't get that much recognition unless they paid for it. But from society, that is. Um, I think there probably are more heroes in business than in sports. You just don't never hear about them.
Mm-hmm.
Because you sort of you look upon them as people are just on there to make money, but not all are. What we've tried to create is kind of the highest recognition a business leader can get globally, and because we think the importance of having role models is quite big. Business leaders like to learn from other business leaders and see that it works. It is possible, whether that is in leadership, in culture, or is in strategy. So that was why the award was established, and it's established in a global process through the 4 largest organizations relevant to this. That is the International Chamber of Commerce, holds something like 25 to 30% of all investable businesses globally. The PRI, the Principles of Responsible Investment, is the largest investor network globally. It's on $80 trillion in total under management. And the UN Global Compact, which is the private public sustainability initiative of the UN, and the UN Development Program, which is the development agenda. They look for candidates that are business worthy and complies with a few criteria. And then this goes through a vetting process and eventually are decided by Nobel laureates in peace and in economics, an independent award committee. And the prize is given out in the City Hall of Oslo, the same venue as the Nobel Peace Prize. So over the years, we have some close to 50 winners, or honorees as we call them. And they are all heroes. They have fantastic stories. And they come in, looking for them over the years, in probably 3 brackets. Smaller businesses, startup businesses, if you like, with a big idea, challenging big problems, but still entrepreneurs on a small scale. Established businesses that turn around and try to be a force for good, as well as big, huge international global companies. We have representative from all those 3 groups. And to mention a few of them, and obviously the aspects of conflict and very difficult situation is also an avenue of this. So this is maybe the hardest things to do, to be able to really navigate in such environments. On the smaller companies, entrepreneurs, I could put attention to Colombian businessman whose name is Edgar Montenegro, and he is tackling some big problems like climate change, inequality, women's rights in a conflict situation. We know that Colombia has been in civil war for many years. There's a lot of drug traffic, coca plants, etc. And he established a company called Corpo Campo, which is active in really food production in a way that have as a high purpose, if you like, sustainable communities, differentiating them from the coca producers and the drug people, if you like. So it's a sustainable farming initiative under the most dire circumstances, which has created some 250 households that he really serves through his business, and has become an emblem on a small scale. Another upstart business, which is quite interesting, is a woman who went from Wall Street to the streets of Bangladesh
Hmm.
and set up in Singapore the first stock exchange for social businesses, for impact investment. Impact Exchange is the name of the company. And it's quite interesting how she's been able to get capital markets inclusive, if you like. So she's redefining and in the forefront of seeing how can you develop the capital markets so that you can price and get more than just the financial return, if you like. It's a quite an interesting woman, I must say. Very, very impressive what she's doing.
Yeah.
On the more established businesses, there's so many fine stories, but Videt Bouchamoui from Tunis has a family business with the same name, and she took an initiative as head of that company in 2011 during the Arab Spring, and she took leadership of the Confederation of Tunisian Industries, and were leading in establishing what was called the Tunisian Dialogue Quartet. And they had an extremely important role in really saving Tunisia's economy and really getting Tunis to become maybe the one country in the Arab Spring who's been able to come through it.
Right.
And she received the award in 2014, and the year after, she also, together with this Tunisian quartet, received the Nobel Peace Prize. So she got both prizes, which is quite interesting. So, to close up on the global companies, I'd like to mention Paul Polman, who headed up Unilever, one of the world's largest companies, some 250 or 300,000 employees all over the world. It's really a big oil tanker that he changed into kind of social sustainability kind of thinking. He's a preeminent leader for what can be done in the biggest of companies, and also challenging Wall Street by saying that we stop reporting on a quarterly basis. We need longer term thinking. But we have an ambition of growing, so we double the size of revenues at the same time as he decrease their footprint and a number of other aspects. So this is just to exemplify that business is from the smallest to the biggest, and there are examples of heroes in all of these areas.
I think that these examples are so crucial, and I know that you and I have talked about it, but when my students come in, or even business people generally, there's almost an instinctive reaction to say, well, business has to stink in order to be successful. I mean, it has to do bad stuff in order to be profitable. And I even think in terms of movies and things like that. How many times have you seen a major film depict a business person in a positive way? And it's hard to do. It's hard to find, even with children's movies, that the business person is always the bad guy. It's always the greedy, slimy bad guy, and that can become its own path-dependent problem of business students thinking, well, I'd like to be business worthy, I'd like to be ethical, but that's not the real world. Well, I agree with you, Per, that I think that there are a lot more business people who are heroes than in the sports world. I think there's a lot of really good people. I mean, when I practiced law, I know that most of my clients, there were a few who were a little bit shady, and they didn't stay my clients, I would say. But most of them were good, honest people working their hardest to try to treat their employees well and do their best for customers. And I think that, but we don't hear enough of those examples. And I think one of the really cool things about what you are doing in the foundation is to provide these examples that people can look to, so that when my students, ask me, well, give me an example of a business that's actually, doing good stuff, I can say, look at the Oslo Awards. And I think that kind of concrete example itself helps to have a mind shift so that people can understand that it's possible. If you don't think it's possible, then you give up and you just kind of slug around. But if you recognize that it's possible to these things, then it's incumbent on you to say whether you're up to the challenge to follow that possibility or not. And so I wanted to make sure that we had that opportunity for you to talk about those. And certainly, if you go to the Business for Peace Foundation website, any of the people who are watching, you'll see examples of other examples of those honorees that Per just highlighted a few of them, but they're great stories and they're inspiring stories. And it makes you, if you're a business person, realize that, well, maybe you can do a little bit better than what you're doing, because other people did it as well. So, that's great. Thank you for sharing those. Let me move to a final question for today. Although, Per and I have laughed over the years that when he and I get talking, we can talk for a long, long time, and because we just have a great time and we see eye to eye and we reinforce each other. But I recognize that our viewers, may be tuning in for a shorter period of time, and I want to make sure that you get good value from this, and without necessarily having to stick with us for 2 hours. But although I could, again, but there was, we're at an interesting point. 2020 has been an interesting time for any number of reasons around the world. There's been a lot that's been going on, but one thing that I do want to focus on a little bit is the coronavirus pandemic. And because of the global pandemic, it's created great stress throughout society, including, loss of jobs. And when you have loss of jobs, and when you have, there's angst, there's pressure, there's fear, that can undermine or harm social harmony, because the resources aren't as abundant, and so it can feel a little bit scary of needing to grab what you can grab for yourself. And I'm just wondering if you have thoughts of how business can be an agent for promoting social harmony in a global crisis that we really haven't seen like this in pandemic form in 100 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this situation we have is underscoring very much the need for business to become business worthy. You can't have a healthy business in an unhealthy world. I think the pandemic has revealed some deep structural issues and problems and weaknesses and vulnerability. At the same time, how interdependent we are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is no borders in a pandemic like this. I think it has brought us to understand that what got us into this crisis is maybe not what will get us out of it. I think it's important that we use this occasion or this situation to build back better business. We need, I think it's also been shown that even though business can do a lot, and I'll say a few words on that, I think it's also shown that if we don't have able governments, we don't have much. And this has really shown the need we have for society. Business can't survive in a vacuum. Business must be here for society. And I think there's a lot of people now that see that an able and strong government helps also coming through the crisis. So there's probably some eye-opening in that context as well. I think we need to use this situation to create a new and better and greener and more equal design, if you like. And we need to use this to accelerate the conversion to such such a design. I think it's relevant here to bring the attention to the Sustainable Development Goals,
Mm-hmm.
which I assume most people know about now, because they represent, I think, a metaphor for how to get out of this with the economy instead. And it's really a roadmap for societal development in the direction we all would like it to be. But it's also a business plan. So in a way, when we spoke earlier on the need for merging profit to a higher purpose, the SDG operationalizes that higher purpose. That is the plan. And people now focusing on and active in business over the last few years has been quite conscious of the ESG agenda, environmental, social, and governance. And you can see that priced at the stock exchange. ESG is really about covering the downside, not doing the mistakes, if you like. But SDGs are really the upside.
Mm.
How can we reap the upside? How can we get that purpose to drive the profits, if you like? So I think that represent what business need to focus on now. And I'm quite happy to give an example of what's happening. A number of our honorees got together during the pandemic and said, this is the time. They are all individuals. They're not organized as such, but they have this common denominator of being business worthy, if you like. So they took an initiative to build back better business and trying to combine the ability to save life, but also save livelihoods. And they focused on what business can do in the global south. And the reasoning for that is that so far, the strong has catered for themselves and the less resourceful has been left out. And the global south has sort of come out on the losing end, if you like, with weak borrowing capacities and healthcare, reduced income from natural resources, tourism, and what have you. And a number of the honorees have operations in these countries already. And they have issued a call for action where they, as business leaders, invite other business leaders to join them in this, in trying to use the ability to build a better design. So I urge you to go into the website and see that initiative. You find it on Businessworthy or the Business for Peace Foundation. And that's really what they, as business leaders, have done and are doing to get out of this pandemic in a way that creates value and harmony in society for all.
That's great. That's great. And one of the things that really struck me as you were talking there is how much different sectors in society need each other. It's not just one sector that's going to solve anything, but at the same time, each sector has something that they can do. And I remember way back 20 years ago or so when I did my first Business and Peace conference. And at the time, that was when I was at the University of Michigan. And Madeleine Albright actually was one of our speakers. She was a guest professor at the William Davidson Institute at Michigan at the time. And she talked about how she taught when you would talk to people about this idea of business and peace or peace generally. And it was always that the other two sectors were the ones who were responsible. So if you were a business person, the responsibility for peace or social harmony was government and civil society. If you ask someone in government, oddly, they said business and civil society. If you ask someone in civil society, they said business and government. And so it was always the other two. And it is true that those other two, whichever ones you pick at the moment, do have something to do, something important to do. But all three have something important to do. And I think that what you highlighted is the importance of one of those sectors, which of government, that we really need to have strong governments and fair governments and democratic governments and governments that are hearing the voices of people throughout their countries and world. And that, but you've also highlighted what business can do in order to foster social harmony and peace and pursuing a new kind of business climate and sustainability. And of course, by forming a foundation on this, you are speaking out of civil society as a way to broadcast that. And so I think that your presentation really is a nice example of how, highlighting of how all these sectors have a part to do. And one of the biggest challenges is not for any one of us to get comfortable and say that it's everybody else, but not me. It's a me too. It's every one of us has something to do. Um, and so, I mean, this was an excellent, as always, as I knew, a great conversation with you, Per. And I think that you've highlighted, really important things about what businesses can do, and an ethic, an approach, a way to think about the world and our interactions with each other. That if we do that, we can very much convert enemies and strangers to friends, and we can overcome cultural divides and differences through the work that we do at work. And that along with some of these other, what I call cultural artifacts, I think are the road out. I agree with you that what got us into this is not necessarily what's going to get out of it. And the whole point of this series is to try to explore those other kinds of avenues and those other kinds of resources and institutions that might work together and give us touchstones to be able to work our way out of the situations that we find ourselves here in the early 20th century. So any final comments or anything that you want to say, Per, before I let you go?
Well, I'll just echo what you said. So thank you so much.
Like I said, audience, Per and I tend to reinforce each other. We're of similar minds. So again, thanks very much, Per, for joining us today. And next month, we're going to be returning to music next month, but not just with me, but with 3 professors from Indiana University. One who is the chair of our African Studies and African Diaspora Studies, and then 2 professors from the Jacobs School of Music, where we're going to be talking about how music can engender the kind of empathy that allows us to connect with others. And so I will be interviewing them like I did Per today, and you will find that they have a lot better things to say than what I had to say last month anyway. And so it's worth tuning in to hear what all those other folks had to say. So thanks very much, everybody, and we'll see you again next month.